My name's Dane. The project I'm going to be working on is a three-legged pedestal. We're going to start off by doing the midsection. I've got a 3.5 by 3.5 piece of stock, and I've just taken off the corners to eliminate sawdust. First things first, we're just going to simply mill the stock around. Okay, I'm using the bottom cleaning bit. Go ahead and plunge it down until you touch the surface of the wood. Now you can see here I still have some flat spots. I'll go ahead and make a second pass and we'll go down to our final depth. Now that I have a perfect cylinder, we milled it to the biggest diameter possible. If you wanted to get a specific diameter, just use some dial calipers, measure it, and then just do additional passes. The part that I designed on the design kit is very similar to this part. Six-sided router bit turnings. I have a tapered section in here that I'll come back and flute. I have a ball, and then on the end here I have my joinery. My next cuts will be the router bit turnings. For the router bit profiles, I will be using a classical spiral. The next three cuts I will be doing will be the same depth. So plunge the router bit till the shoulder of the bit touches the top of the wood. On the x-axis scale, my three cuts will be at 5, 18, and 20. For my first cut, I will start the router bit off the back side of the wood, turn my stock counterclockwise. After I cut my router bit turnings, I'm going to make this section up here a six-sided part. Now there's a couple different ways to determine the plunge depth to make a perfect six-sided part. One of the ways that I use is AutoCAD. I have a six-sided and an eight-sided part here. From the top of the surface of the wood, I plunge down 0.2 and I'll come out with a perfect six-sided part. Another way is to go ahead and make two light cuts. I'm going to make a six-sided part. Go ahead and make your first pass. Index it 4 holes, make your second pass. If the corner doesn't line up perfect, you know you have to adjust your plunge depth. For my first two cuts, my plunge depth will be at 0.2. Grab your feeler gauges, put it in between the plunge bar and the stop, lock it down, and we're ready to cut. Now if your two corners don't line up, you'll have a flat spot right here. You'll know you'll have to adjust your plunge depth. And it looks like on my part I have it perfect, so we'll go ahead and carry on. After cutting my six-sided part, let's come down here and do our joinery. I'm going to do 3 different flat sections so my feet will mount up flush against the turning. The thickness of my feet are going to be 1.5 inches, so my flat spots have to be 1.5 inches. To determine the plunge depth is I'll make a series of light cuts until the flat spots are exactly 1.5 inches or slightly bigger. I cut out on the bandsaw the template of the 3 feet I'll be using. On my flat surfaces, I don't want to mill all the way up to my router bit turnings. I only want to measure from the end up 3 inches. On my x-axis scale, we'll set a stop at 23 1/4. Let's go ahead and measure and see where we're at now. Looks like we measure at 1.36. Let's make an adjustment in our plunge depth to make our surface 1.5. Make one more pass. Okay, our first surface is done. I'm going to make a 3-sided part, so that means I'm going to go every 8th hole. Before I use my dovetail bit, we're going to use the 2-flute straight cutter for chip relief. My dovetail, I don't want to go all the way to the end of my flat surface. I want to stop a little early for my tenon. I'm going to set a stop on my x-axis scale at 23 1/2 inches. Now that we have our chip relief, I put my dovetail bit in, and let's repeat the process. Now that my joinery is done, my bed has been level for all of these cuts. I'm going to come in here and do a tapered section, so that means I'm going to have to adjust my bed. Okay, now for our tapered section, this diameter is 3 inches. I'm going to go down to 2 inches over 12 inches. I'm going to refer to my taper chart, and it says that I need to adjust this end of the bed 1 1/4 inches up. Because I'm removing so much material down at this end, I'm going to go at this at multiple passes. I have my bed at the correct taper. Let's go ahead and do this. Now that our taper is done, we're going to come in here and do some teardrop flutes. Traditionally, we would adjust our bed back to level again. But what we did is we dropped our headstock end another inch, giving us a 2-inch difference in between our tailstock and headstock. I put a V-groove bit in. I am 1 inch from each detail is where I'm going to start and stop my flute. To get our plunge depth, I'll just plunge the V-groove bit down to the surface of the wood on my headstock side. I'm going to do 6 equally spaced flutes going every 4th hole on the index. Now let's review what we've done. First, we went ahead and turned it round. We came in, did our router bit profiles. We put a 6-sided part up here. We did some joinery down at the bottom. Now the next things that we're going to do is our feet. We're going to use the pin router, and then we're going to turn a top on the rotary table. Make the tabletop using our optional rotary indexing table. As you can see, I've scribed a line, kind of roughed it out on the bandsaw, applied some double-sided sticky tape. Just go ahead and mount it to the rotary table. Okay, our next step is we're going to go ahead and turn this round. Our plunge depth is just going to be just below our tabletop. We've got a stop set back here on our x-axis so we don't run the router bit into our gear or MDF. Now that our tabletop is round, I'm going to come back around the outside with this router bit profile. Now I have the rope molding bit in here. I came 1 inch off the edge. We're just going to put a little detail in here. My plunge depth is 0.04. Okay, after a little bit of sanding and touching up, let's review what we did. On the outside, I used a bull nose and rounded it over. Just 1 inch from the outside, I just did a little detail, and that pretty much rounds up the top. Now the thing that we have left is our feet, and I've pretty much finished up our project. Now that we've finished our turn section and our tabletop, we're going to move on to our feet. I've referred to this template a couple times. Now let's go ahead and use the revo and show you how this is done. The first cut that I'm going to make is the dovetail. Normally you'd use a router table to cut the dovetail. I'm going to show you an alternate method using the revo. Okay, now I've transferred my template over to my stock. Went ahead and made a couple cuts on my table saw. These cuts have got to be pretty crucial because they are perpendicular to each other. Okay, to make our dovetail cuts, I'm going to use my vertical vise as a reference point as well as the top of the rail. I had to use a C-clamp because of the thickness of my boards. We're going to line up each board to the top of the rail and flush with our vertical vise. We're going to cut on the front side and flip it, and then we'll cut again on the other side. I'm using a 3/4 inch dovetail bit, the same bit that I used on my turn section. We went a 1/2 inch deep. So I'll use that same 1/2 inch on my feet. Now let's take a closer look on how to set the y-axis. Okay, I went ahead and scribed a center line and went off the center line 3/8 of an inch on both sides, giving me a 3/4 inch dovetail. What we're going to do is take our router bit, reference it right off the line, and we'll make a series of cuts until the line is removed. Now once again, on the front side, I'm cutting right to left. Okay, I went ahead and switched my board over. I'm going to leave the plunge depth the same and the y-axis the same. Let's go ahead and finish our dovetail. I have my 3 feet here. I went to the bandsaw and just removed the material that was waste. I have mounted my piece of MDF template to one of my feet with double-sided tape. You could use screws, but that will give you screw holes. We're going to use our optional pin router accessory on our revo, and let's begin. Now let's take a closer look on what the optional pin router attachment will do for your revo. Our pin router attachment mounts underneath our table. We have 4 different options of styluses. Keep in mind, the same size router bit that you use is the same size stylus. For my particular application, I'll be using a 2-flute 1/2 inch straight cutter. I'll be using a 1/2 inch stylus. I have my 1/2 inch stylus just raised above my table, following my template below. I have a 1/2 inch straight cutter on top. I have my plunge depth set at an 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to make a series of passes until my router bit is below my part. Okay, after I've pin routed all of my feet out, I used some double-sided tape and just stuck it down to a piece of MDF table. I'm going to use a router bit with a bearing and just round over the feet. Now the nice thing about using a router bit with a bearing is we can follow any contour, shape, or pattern. After we rounded all over our corners, I just did some light sanding. Now let's move on to our assembly. Okay, as you can see, we just dry fit this just so we make sure all the joints fit nicely. We're going to go ahead and stain this. So once we stain it, then we'll go ahead and do the final assembly. We used just a small piece of 3x3, 3/4 inch piece of oak just as a spacer for our top. We'll put some glue on here and then we'll just shoot some brads up through there. And that will complete our three-legged pedestal.